Hello, welcome back to the NOTCAST, episode 265. Today is Wednesday, 18th of January, 2023. And today I am going to be talking about, and I've been looking forward to this one for a long time, like way back when I started doing David Bowie episodes. I was thinking, oh, I can't wait until I get to this period, because this is my favourite period of David Bowie. And I'm going to be talking about his 1995 album, the somewhat odd Outside. And there's an awful lot of stuff to go through with this one. It's my favourite period of him, primarily because this is the time when I went all in as being a Bowie fan. And from here on in, from the day that I first heard the Heart's Filthy Lesson, all the way in, I was like, right, I'm in for life. I'm not stopping. And I think that the reason why that is, I mean, obviously I was aware of him in 1989 with Tin Machine. I kind of was paying attention to the greatest hits and Black Tie and Blood of Suburbia and stuff. But with this period, this was the time where I got to be a Bowie fan and experience it in real time, as opposed to somebody that wasn't quite sure. Because you remember 1983, when I was 10 years old, Bowie was the guy in the sailor suit doing, you know, generic Let's Dance type stuff. For this period, he was not doing that at all. He was busy and exciting and interesting and just, you know, in many ways, almost like a bit of a guide, really, because the idea was, you know, he was, what, 48 or something around about the time that this came out. And I always kind of looked for people from his genre that had come up from around about his period of time. You know, you're talking about Brian Ferry, Mark Knopfler, Bob Dylan, all those type of people. And they were awful. They were just, you know, meaningless. I'd listen to MTV showing something like Dire Straits' Calling Elvis or whatever the song was called. And I'd be like, I can't relate to that at all. You know, that's a song about, or all those artists were not about anything that I found in any way challenging or interesting, because they'd solved on Maslow's hierarchy of needs the things that they really, really were interested in. So they were interested in, you know, when you start off, you've got a number of areas of your life that you want to complete. And those areas, you know, you want a career, you want financial security, you want to have a good love life, you want to be happy and comfortable in who you are. And yeah, by the time you get to that point, suddenly you get to the point where you're Brian Ferry and you're writing songs about supermodels and swimming pools, or you're Mark Knopfler and you're writing songs about your record collection, and you kind of go, well, what's this actually all about? What's in here for me as an 18-year-old to try and relate to something that's being made by a guy who's 50? Now, the idea was, as you got older, you became boring and turgid and mediocre, and you started pulling out meaningless crap through habit. And all of a sudden, with Outside, what I had was an artist who was vibrant, alive. He was questioning, he was exploring, he was going to new places, doing new things. He was going, actually, I can go anywhere, I can do anything. I'm not going to go and do the thing that I'd done before. I'm going to do something new, something different. And it was a fascinating time, actually, to be a fan. Now, I didn't see him on the Outside tour because he played in Birmingham, and I just didn't have the money. I was poor, and it was awful, and I hated it. And you know, obviously, as the Smiths sang in the song "Everything She Wants Costs Money," is that, you know, money was a way of getting power and leverage and access to various things. And so I was very much a kind of like, felt that I was a bit shut out, because he played Birmingham 3 times, I think, on this tour, twice supported by Morrissey. And I just didn't have the money to go, you know, and friends of mine who had different, better paying jobs were able to go, and I wasn't. And I just couldn't do it, you know. If I could go back in time and send one thing to the me of then, well, it'd probably be a bit of advice around a couple of people that I was in relationships with. And then secondly, I'd send a load of money back to me, because I could really, really benefit from that then. So we have the Outside album. And here is the 2022 repressing. This is taken, by the way, from the vinyl edition of the Brilliant Adventures box set, which I will be mentioning later on. I have the whole box set down here. Good God, it's heavy. I think it needs a weight warning on it, but there it is. and I picked up a copy that was damaged for considerably cheaper than the retail price of £429 or thereabouts. So released on the 25th of September 1995. I think this was his 16th album or his 17th album. And there are very few bands or acts that when you get to like album 20 in your career, you're still doing new and exciting things. You're still going to new and different places. But luckily David Bowie was doing that. Now the first kind of part of this is immediately in the aftermath of Buddha of Suburbia. David went to a studio, I think it was in Montreux, and the germination of the album came from Bowie and Brian Eno, discussing possibly working together again at David's wedding in 1992. And in March 1994, Brian Eno, who was excited by the new direction of the Buddha of Suburbia record, the kind of instrumental soundscapes that are all over that I absolutely love, came to a place called Mountain Studios, which I think is in Montreux, which possibly doesn't exist anymore. And all of that, by the way, is detailed in Eno's book, A Year with Swollen Appendices, which is in another room and I can't be bothered to get it. But it's been reprinted recently. You can get a copy for about £10. And the approach that they had with this is that they would go into a studio, they'd build a band, and then they'd go and write and improvise new material. Lots of bands do this. Pink Floyd did it for 3 weeks when they were recording The Division Bell. Same year, Bowie took the various people that he knew and put them together, and they improvised their way through some material, which was going to be a thing called the Leon Suites, which they recorded 5 largely improvised, made up on the fly sessions. Bowie had taken a bunch of lyrics that he'd written and he put them into a Mac, and they had a randomizer in there, and then it came out with streams and streams of text. So he didn't have to think about what he was going to sing. It was all there. It was, randomized, remixed versions of unpublished poems and prose pieces that he'd written. And he had that as his lyric cue. I think Reeves Gabrels was part of it. I think there was a drummer called Sterling Campbell who later joined Soul Asylum, and I think Erdl might have been on bass, and Mike Garson was in some of it, and Brian Eno was playing textures and pianos and things like that as well. And effectively they just built up a series of largely improvised 20-30 minute pieces. 3 of those were mixed and presented as a potential album, which was rejected by the then label. Those 3 mixes are out there as the Leon Suites. I think they are called The Enemy is Fragile, I Am With Name, and the Leon Takes Us Outside suite. And in those suites, they're absolutely fascinating to hear, the germinations of and the embryos and the fetuses of what would later become standard 4-minute songs on the Outside album. You can hear bits of Nothing to Be Desired, The Enemy is Fragile, I Am With Name. There's a section about anxiety, which is one of the spoken word pieces on the Outside album. There's let's think what else is on there. I think there's We Will Creep Together, I think, which was, I don't think it's on the record actually. No, it isn't. And then I Have Not Been to Oxford Town, and a number of other kind of I think there might be A Small Plot of Land or something like that as well, was in those suites, and they kind of extracted bits out of those. It's common working practice is to take bits of jams and then to kind of like build them into bigger, different songs that are more fully formed and separate identities. Because sometimes, when you're in the moment, you either repeat a piece kind of like endlessly, or you do something for like 4 bars, and that's the gold, and you go and go, right, I'm going to have that, and you kind of Pro Tools it to within an inch of its life, and then you turn it into the bedrock of another song, and you put a different vocal over it, and all of a sudden the whole thing is fully formed. The Leon Suites are absolutely fascinating to listen to. They're not fun. I'd listen to them again, and I wouldn't necessarily listen to them often, I think it's fair to say. But they are, you can see where the album itself came from. Now, if you're being very cheeky, you could probably take those Leon Suites and you could take the Outside album and you could form a 2-hour Pink Floyd's Wall style epic double LP that takes on the Outside themes, but that's not what happened. Those 3 suites were rejected. David took that material away, and then he started to form more conventional songs from it. The album as such was completed in November 1994. And after the rejection of it, David went back into the studio, this time in New York, with some extra musicians. Kevin Armstrong, who played guitars on the Tin Machine album, and also we played with Morrissey, Carlos Alomar, who played guitar with David in the 70s and parts of the 80s as well. And then they kind of added some new material. So the new material that they added at that point was Heart's Filthy Lesson, Hello Space Boy, I Have Not Been to Oxford Town, No Control, We Prick You, Through These Architects' Eyes, and a re-recorded, rearranged version of Strangers When We Meet, which wasn't on the original configuration. What that meant was, you know, you had maybe half of the record and you added the extra half later. But it doesn't sound like it's the product of two different sessions at two different times by two different sets of musicians. This sounds like a fantastically cohesive, albeit somewhat overweight, David Bowie LP. David signed with Virgin in June 1995, and he also kind of signed with them the rights to their 1983, or his 1983 to 1989 catalogue. So Let's Dance, Tonight, The Glass Spider, Tin Machine number 1, and those were reissued on CD in 1995 with bonus tracks because they hadn't been in the Riker disc series, as well as this album, Outside, the first fruits of which were a rather unusual little single, actually, which got to a grand total of number 35 in the UK charts, and I think it got to number 92 in the US, The Heart's Filthy Lesson. This comes with a remix by Trent Reznor of the 9 Inch Nails. They're good, woo! And this is a fantastically atonal left field turn. If you're kind of going, well, what would be the obvious single to release from the album? The obvious single would have been Strangers When We Meet, and then the next obvious single would have been Hello Space Boy in that remixed form. What we have here instead, A Heart's Filthy Lesson, is a very determinedly, it's setting out the stall as this is weird and unusual. It's probably the most abrasive of the non-Tin Machine Bowie singles. It's back with a 9 Inch Nails remix, and actually the original sounds just like 9 Inch Nails as well. You can really tell that David Bowie has had a fantastic record collection throughout the course of his career. Now, underpinning this, Outside, everything that goes with it, is the reminder that this album is, I think it's kind of like an interconnected hyper song cycle for the internet age, or some other phrase, the name of which I don't know, because I think it's printed on the booklet to the original release of Outside. Effectively, it is a concept album, and it's a concept album about nothing, in so much as it's not necessarily a concept album about, you know, mobile phones, fast cars, what happens when you've married a supermodel, all that stuff. This is a concept album that takes its genus from, as David Bowie said in an interview with a chap called Larry Katz, I think wrote for the Boston Herald. Larry has very recently put his tape recordings, he gave them to an archive for a university in America, and you can hear thousands, if not more than that, of interviews with people very candidly talking with a local newspaper reporter in full. And there's an interview with David from 1995, which is on there, and I'll post the link to it in the comments, which is him talking about the genus and the idea that sat behind the Outside album. So the thing that inspired the Outside album was the idea of murder as entertainment, of death as a form of pleasure. And you think about an awful lot of procedural cop shows that were on television in the 90s, not just in the UK with stuff like The Bill and Midsummer Murders and A Touch of Frost and all that stuff, but in America, things like CSI, Law and Order, SVU, FBI, all that stuff. Police procedural shows, or as Mr. Dick Wolf, the creator of Law and Order, said, copaganda, are cheap entertainment. Actually, you know, a murder is the most exciting thing that you can produce on a domestic budget for entertainment. People are always interested in it, maybe because sometimes people want to murder other people and don't actually do it. Secondly, because a murder is probably, you know, the most fascinating way to start the mystery. It's the very definition of a whodunit. So David was watching a lot of that television, and he decided that what he was going to do was take that concept of death and violence and murder as entertainment and build that as the core tenet of the Outside album. The plot of which is pretty unclear actually. But as a concept album, there's multiple narrators, there's multiple viewpoints, and the plot as such is around an unfinished investigation into a murder in a place called Oxford Town in New Jersey, which is clearly, I think, very heavily influenced by Twin Peaks, which David appeared on as an actor in 1992. And the characters are Nathan Adler, who I think is a detective who was born in 1947, Baby Grace, who was born in 1980 and murdered in 1994, who also, by the way, may be the dead girl that appears in the Lazarus stage play that was written by David in 2015. Algeria Touchshriek, what a terrible name, who is a 78-year-old loner and art collector. And Leon Blanc, who is an outsider, who is effectively a blank. He has very little in the way of distinctive personality. There's a character called Paddy, who is an informant to Nathan. And then there's also a character called the Artist, also known as the Minotaur, who is a murderer. And this album kind of looks at that murder from about 5 or 6 different perspectives, although without the interstitial segues and spoken word sections, you wouldn't make the slightest bit of sense of it. You just go, it's a fucking great David Bowie album. I have no idea what it means. And even with those bits in, I now think of it as, it's a fucking great David Bowie album. I have no idea what it means. So be it. It opens, side 1, track 1 is Leon Takes Us Outside, which, by the way, there was originally a vinyl edition of this. It was on a single LP. It didn't have any of the spoken word sections. It dropped a couple of the songs. I think it dropped Through These Architects' Eyes, I think. And it possibly Strangers When We Meet, because Strangers When We Meet had been on Buddha in Suburbia. And it had edits and stuff, and it was a pretty brutal experience. But what we had is an LP that's also kind of very clearly draws allusions to Bowie as an art collector. So he had a collection of modern art that he'd basically spent his money on, which became more important over time and then became very prominent in the period immediately after his death. It became very high profile because there was an auction of his art collection which raised an awful lot of money. But his art collection was one of the things that really interested him. You know, he had a statement that was on the wall at the auction that took place at, I think, Christie's in 2016, which effectively said, art is the only thing that I wanted to do. It would have the ability for me to change my mood or my way of thinking or how I saw the world. It was the only thing that ever interested me. And outside is most definitely art. Now, to quote Bono, I don't know what it means, so it must be art. Kind of true, kind of not true. It was also the first album that Bowie had created, most definitely in the post-internet era. So he was obviously very connected as a individual, very linked to the cutting edge of technology. The Leon suites in particular make specific mention of some very early and arcane internet words and jargon, things like packet sniffers and information superhighways and all these things that we now don't even take for granted. You know, about what does HTTP mean? Hypertext Transfer Protocol. But, you know, that's the type of stuff where David was talking about in terms of a technological revolution. You think about the major revolutions that have been in Western civilization. The first one is the Industrial Revolution, the thing that liberated us from the tyranny of housework through the invention of the fridge, through the invention of the washing machine, through the invention of the electric toothbrush, and through the invention of the microwave. That's stuff that liberated us from what was otherwise spending lots and lots of hours basically toil, maintaining the house, keeping the clothes dry, cooking the food, keeping the food in, you know, like a stone thing outside that was away from animals, so that it would remain as cool as possible and it would keep for a little bit longer, so you wouldn't have to go to the butcher's every day. You could buy food a month in advance or 9 months in advance and keep it in the fridge. The internet was a very similar thing from an information perspective. It was an information revolution, completely changed my experience of and my communication with other human beings. And obviously the vast majority of other people as well. Nowadays, we don't think anything of taking a picture and putting it on Instagram for people who are interested in to see it. Whereas obviously in those days, before the internet, if you took a picture and you liked it, you had to wait for it to come out from the negative, and then there was one copy and that was it, and you were the only person that ever saw it. And maybe sometimes you'd show your holiday photographs if you had friends and they came over after you'd been on holiday, and you go, here's us on the beach, and then, oh, there's a topless shot of my wife, and quickly move along, you know, that type of thing. But changed the world completely. And so Outside was the first post-internet Bowie album. And very, very clearly around, you know, the connection that had, the ability to communicate instantly with complete strangers all across the world. And now the inner sleeve has a number of characters on it. So it calls it the Diary of Nathan Adler, or the Art Ritual Murder of Baby Grace Blue, which is, and that's him as Nathan Adler, I believe. Now underneath that, right, in tiny, tiny letters here, it's a non-linear Gothic drama hypercycle. If you know what that is, don't bother telling me. I don't think anybody really knows. And on the second part of the inner sleeves, we have the Minotaur, which is kind of mentions some specific songs. So each one of the characters has a song or two which works with it. Obviously, the Voyeur of Utter Destruction as Beauty is the song that's linked to the Minotaur. And we've got the lyric booklet, which is here, which I think I might go through for the individual songs. Also got on the inner sleeves, you've got the various shots. So obviously you've got the credits and the Minotaur. You've got David Bowie as another character here. I think this is Nathan Adler again. And then here's another one of his characters. This time he's wearing a sock over his eyes and what looks to be a sardine. So it's nice to know that perhaps actually it is about nothing as an album. It's got nothing. It's got no correlation to anything. And so the lyric booklet that we have in here, which was also the CD version, features an imaginary storyline which opens. It was at precisely 5:47 AM on the morning of Friday the 31st of December of 1999 that a dark-spirited pluralist began the dissection of 14-year-old baby Grace. And you kind of have, there's Nathan Adler there from the Heart's Filthy Lesson, and there's I think baby Grace there shortly before she's murdered. You've got kind of like a logo here which calls itself the Art Crime Incorporated, the Arts Protectorate of London. And you can really think, oh man, this guy's really gone hyper dude, man. And there's you know, like, it's a non-linear section. So for example, you might be able to tie this into the individual songs, I don't know, which starts Thursday, October the 27th 1994. I don't know if that was the actual date. I guess it was. June 15th 1977, Kreuzberg, Berlin, which obviously was probably where David and Iggy Pop were at the time. Back to 1994. We've got a character here. So this character is called the Acolyte, whoever that is. You know, you've got Leon Blanc, who has a tiny little photo here. We've got a number of other kind of artistic interpretations. You've got a bunch of lyrics on here, and it tells you who sings each one of the lyrics. So the Heart's Filthy Lesson is sung by Nathan Adler. A Small Plot of Land by the residents of Oxford Town, New Jersey. Hello Space Boy, to be sung by Paddy. And you can kind of go, well, this is a kind of like almost like a stage play, but in album form, although Bowie is pretty clear that he's not doing a stage play version of it. And it all gets pretty confusing pretty quickly. The first track, Leon Takes Us Outside, is only 1 minute and 24 seconds long, but it is very heavily influenced, I think, by U2's Europa album, which, you know, oddly enough was produced by Brian Eno, who had a huge chunk of work to do with this particular record. So it's kind of like, well, U2 being influenced by Bowie, Bowie being influenced by U2, Brian Eno being kind of like on the Venn diagram of tying all of those bits together. And you go for track 2, which is Outside, 4 minutes 3 seconds long. And that was first played, I think it was played live by Tin Machine once or twice in 1989. And the chord sequence that's from Outside was used in the re-recording of Look Back in Anger from 1988. That's on one of the Ryko disc reissues, the name of which I cannot recall because I've not thought about it for about 8 months. And Outside, as a song is very clear. This should be the song that opens the LP. You know, most LPs have a good opening track. Outside is absolutely perfect for it. It sounds like you're watching the opening credits of a detective movie, with the guy driving into the town, taking us outside, going through the town and seeing the things that are in there before, you know, he parks up at the police station to begin investigating that dreadful little murdering that took place. And of course, track 3, The Heart's Filthy Lesson, sung by Nathan Adler, is that kind of that song where the character takes over and kind of tells you, right, so okay, so I'm going to go and investigate the murder. Here's the original CD edition from 1995, broadly very similar, and has the, you know, a version of the booklet that's on the inside. There was a version of the album that was cut down and changed over time, but what we have is we have all the same artwork in a slightly different configuration here. I don't think the lyrics are on this, actually. No, they're not. At least I don't think they are. But we do have a couple of extra bits of graphics that are on here, which aren't on the inner sleeve. So I don't think these two pictures are on the inner sleeve for the reissue LP. But you can kind of see there, one of them is a pretty graphic cadaver with a bunch of body parts that are in there, presumably bought from the local butchers on the morning of the photo shoot. We have track 4, Small Plot of Land, and this is where you can really hear the interplay between Mike Garson and Reeves Gabrels. And I think putting those two guys together is absolutely perfect, because although they both worked with David at different periods of time and in different periods of his career, together they both got a very similar approach to sound and texture. Mike being a very jazz influenced, very tinkly piano player, not unlike Jules Holland, but without the bit of Jules Holland that's absolutely sentimental, sappy shite. And Reeves has a very similar approach to adding sound as texture, to populate the sound with unusual kind of tones and atmospheres, and to use it to create that. And then you've got the two of them playing together, and you can really hear the atonal, slightly threatening, jazz inflected piano of Mike Garson, alongside the art rock guitar of Reeves Gabrels. And I think if you listen to, there's a couple of other guitarists who I rate really highly. One is Buckethead from Guns N' Roses, or formerly of Guns N' Roses, who has a very similar playing style to Reeves, but is perhaps, I think, slightly more clinical and less emotional in his playing. And you can kind of imagine, wow, what would have happened if Buckethead and Bowie would have played together? You know, what an incredible kind of, collaboration that could have been. Or in fact, around about this time, I had the idea that maybe Alan Wilder from Depeche Mode, if he'd worked with Bowie, I mean, wow, what an amazing set of songs and material that would be. Didn't happen. We got what we got. And by the way, what we got, very good indeed. And we've got Segue 5, which is Baby Grace, a horrid cassette, which is Bowie kind of narrating part of the experience of either being kidnapped or murdered or whatever it is by Baby Grace. Now, as I've mentioned, in Lazarus, the stage play, which premiered in 2015, features a character of a dead girl. And I don't think it's fully a coincidence that that person and Baby Grace in this, there's definitely a connection between the two if you want to see it, and it could be there. They could be the same person, and Lazarus could effectively be a sequel in parts, or a continuation of some of the storylines which were laid in Outside. Basically, Bowie was weird, and he always thought about tons and tons of stuff in the way which the vast majority of people never ever did, which is probably why his work has endured and maintained itself over time. What we have with the whole of Outside, though, and this is followed through everything, including the next track, Hello Space Boy, is this sense of end of the millennium, kind of an apocalyptic approach to what's happening there. So 1994, 1995, this was the year when people were starting to realise, yeah, the year 2000 isn't far away. Let's all meet up in the year 2000 when we're all fully grown, and I can meet you on the bus stop down by the road. But also this sense of, the end of the century, the end of a millennia, the end of a decade, the end of an era. As David said in his interview with Larry Katz, probably the biggest decision most people are going to be making on the 1st of January is what to wear. Life itself didn't change dramatically on the flip over from December 1999 to January 2000, but there's still that sense of an end of millennia tension, paranoia, reckoning, the idea that we were coming to the end of something and maybe the start of something new, and maybe civilization was going to be reborn. It wasn't, of course. The wankers are still in power. There was, from a slightly different perspective, there was the rising nostalgia of Britpop, with people who were very blatantly aping, you know, the Beatles and the Kinks and the Who, and wrapping themselves in flags. There was an element of nostalgia. There was an element of stale conservatism around that. The idea that, well, you'll go back to the way things were when you were younger and kind of revisit them as adults, and then maybe that sense of childlike wonder that you may have had when you were 7 and you first put on the Beatles' Red and Blue albums. Let's try it again as adults. But for people that had never experienced, you know, the Beatles' Red and Blue albums as 7-year-olds, it was just this thing that was happening, and there was no sense of history that was running around that. So people were losing their sense of and their connection to the linear narrative of history. And we had, you know, an element of especially in Hello Space Boy, which, by the way, is a semi-sequel to Rebel Rebel. Bowie himself kind of blatantly referring to his past. So Hello Space Boy, the idea, it revisits some of the stuff that's in Starman, some of the ideas that are in Space Oddity as well. The concept of, you know, and the idea about, you know, a story about, you know, do you like girls or boys? It's confusing these days. The idea of what happens at the start of a relationship is referencing a lot of his previous material, but through a completely different kind of prism now. The album mix of Hello Space Boy is 9 Inch Nails style, hard industrial metal. It's easily the heaviest thing that David recorded and released outside of Tin Machine, and very possibly heavier than most of that. It has a fantastic remix by Pet Shop Boys, by the way, which is effectively a re-recording, and which was one of the bigger hits off the LP. Here's a promotional 12-inch of Hello Space Boy with the Pet Shop Boys remixes on it, which didn't get a digital release on a single at the time. The CD single of Hello Space Boy, with this absolutely fantastic cover, by the way, just contains a 7-inch mix, contains live versions of Moon Age Daydream and Under Pressure, and a remix of The Heart's Filthy Lesson. This was, again, actually I love that cover. It's really good, isn't it? But the idea was that this single was almost kind of like an adaptation and a revisiting of Space Oddity. So the remix by Pet Shop Boys, which is the instruments are a full re-recording, has additional vocals by Neil Tennant. There's effectively a duet. I think David may have re-sung some of his vocals on there. Is a cut-up of the lyrics of Space Oddity, but rearranged to make sense inside the narrative of Hello Space Boy. And it could be seen really as the third part of a trilogy that had maybe Starman or Space Oddity to start off with, maybe Rebel Rebel or Ashes to Ashes as the second track, and Hello Space Boy is the third one, the conclusion of that. And those songs all kind of talk to each other in terms of the use of language and imagery and ideas around relationships and spaceships and space travel and visiting, leaving this planet and going somewhere else with that. There's also kind of like an element of being influenced, I think, a little bit by Scott Walker in some of the material. The next track on the album, which is The Motel, it's not a coincidence that the film Psycho is set in a motel at all, and that there's a murder in the film Psycho. And by the way, if that's a spoiler, the film is 61 years old now, so I think we're out of spoiler territory there. There's a lyric around, you know, there is no hell like an old hell, which is, I think, from takes a line, I think, from Scott Walker's The Electrician, which I don't know particularly well. I should do, but lots of his stuff is difficult to get unless you go for very old vinyl these days. So I'm not very well versed with his body of material, but he was a huge influence on Bowie. Obviously, Bowie covered Scott's Night Flights on Black Tie, White Noise. So you can see almost this album has been probably the most arty of the records that Bowie ever released, being a combination of his influences to create something new, using a narrative to try and tell a story about the nature of entertainment and mortality. Whoa, I've been to Sude's Corner on Melody Maker. And then we have track 8, which is I have not been to Oxford Town. And I have not been to Oxford Town is kind of like, you know, when you're younger and you see things on television and you don't go to the places, you can't go to the places. Like it took me until I was in my 30s to go to Chicago. I've still not been to Australia, and I probably will never get to go. Sorry, all my Australian friends, I'd love to visit. But you know, the idea of going somewhere and not necessarily saying, well, no, I haven't been there, it only exists on television to me. Like when I was younger, I'd never been to London, so the idea of London, it's a magical wonderland. Obviously, I lived in London for 5 years. It was not a magical wonderland, kids. Don't believe the hype. If I hadn't been there, I wouldn't have known. Now, I have not been to Oxford Town. Roughly follows the same melody and harmonics as Miracle Goodnight. It's actually also adapted for the Starship Troopers movie. There's a cover version called They Have Not Been to Paradise that appears in it, which I don't really have very much thought about at all. But the idea being, you know, I haven't been to Oxford Town, this mythical place where all this stuff is happening. I haven't been there. As if life is the thing that happens on the other side of the glass and you're just watching it like an observer watching television, or I don't know, some dude watching porn that's never actually, you know, spoken to a woman or something. I don't know. Probably got a car and a terrible YouTube channel. I haven't got a car, so I'm quite safe from that accusation there. Now, track 9 is No Control. And this one will shock and surprise you, it'll leave you shook. No Control is easily in my top 3 Bowie songs. And depending upon what time of day it is and how long it's been since I had lunch, it's often my favourite. I think it's an incredible song. It's dark and threatening and moody, and at the same point it's operatic and childlike. It's like the most terrifying nursery rhyme that you've ever heard. It's just wonderful. There is nothing about it I don't love. No Control is just a song that I think about on a weekly basis. It comes into my head as an earworm, and it's just a wonderful Bowie song that nobody seems to talk about. It's just got this wonderful sense of foreboding around it. And the whole thing came together very, very quickly. You know, that lyric about don't tell God your future, don't tell God your plans, there's no control. The idea of actually, as human beings, we are adrift on the sea of life, being buffeted from one thing to another, and there's no control about it. The only thing we can do is how do we respond to the events that are thrown at us? How do we deal with those? How do we live with those? And I've been in situations where no matter what inputs I was throwing into a certain situation, the outputs just absolutely did not in any way, shape or form relate to the things that I was experiencing. So No Control, sorry, there is a song that I think is absolutely one of Bowie's best, undoubtedly 100%. If someone said to me, oh, you can do any Bowie cover you like for an album, I'd be like, dude, I'm taking No Control for 2 reasons. One, I fucking love that song. Secondly, no one else will pick it, which is absolutely fine. You know, the idea of the lyric is so, you know, stay away from the future, back away from the light, sit tight in the corner, don't tell God your plans. It's all deranged. There's no control. If I could control tomorrow's haze, the darkened shore wouldn't bother me. But if I can't control the web we weave, my life will be lost in the fallen leaves. Every single move's uncertain. Don't tell God your plans. There's no control. Now there's a wonderful bit where there's like a melody and a counterpoint to it. So David's kind of duetting with himself. The bit where he sings, you've got to have a scheme, you've got to have a plan in the world of today for tomorrow's man. And that really sounds like something out of, you know, like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, or apparently there's a musical track called Inchworm that's in a kind of vaguely threatening Hans Christensen film from the 50s. And, you know, if you listen to that, you kind of go, oh God, I can see where that goes from, because it follows the same kind of melodic phrasing, the same kind of and you can kind of do a medley of the two together, but it feels like it's just a nursery rhyme that you've never ever heard before, because it's so simple. You kind of think, why hasn't anybody ever thought of that before? Well, the answer is, if anybody could have thought of it, how come only David Bowie did think of it? I think No Control is in his top 3 songs, and the other 2 are songs that will come up later in his discography. At the time I heard No Control, I was like, this is the best Bowie song. Now, bearing in mind, we have things like Sound and Vision, Be My Wife, Stay, TVC 15, I Can't Read, for example, even the Buddha of Suburbia title track. Those are all phenomenal songs. No Control is, geez, I was like listening to it and going, God, that is amazing how somebody could be that old, that rich, and still come out with stuff that's that interesting. You know, when his contemporaries like Van fucking Morrison and whatever were singing songs about, I don't know, the shape of a leaf, or Genesis was singing about sad school children or something and dressing up as flowers. You know, the idea that Bowie would do something that actually connected with the real world as opposed to an abstract concept was wonderful. Right, that's enough blowing smoke up his ass, I think. The only other thing I would say about No Control is one lyrical interpretation of it is that it is a condemned man looking back over his life. And when you think about other songs that do the same thing, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Hallowed Be Thy Name, and you'll realise that's why David Bowie is better than Iron Bloody Maiden. Because if nothing else, you don't have a cartoon zombie on the covers of all the David Bowie records, unless of course you regard David Bowie himself now as a cartoon zombie, which I don't think is fair. Track 11 is The Voyeur of Utter Destruction as Beauty. It's a song that was played an awful lot live during this period. Very, very popular on the set lists. I think it worked very, very well. It was potentially a single, remixed by Tim Simonian of Bomb the Bass, who later went on to produce Depeche Mode. And the Voyeur of Utter Destruction is a song that really kind of takes the core concept of the album. At this point, not even solving a murder. It's going, is this murder the equivalent of a work of art? Could it be regarded as an artistic murder? Is it executed with the type of style and panache and symbolism that would make it think, you'd make you look at it and go, that's not even a murder. That's like a work executed so perfectly it's got to be art. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful song, but scary as heck. Probably don't listen to it while walking in the dark, I think would be fair to say. Now, the next 2 or 3 songs, we have another segue, which is Ramona, which moves into I Am With Name, which takes the core body of its sound from the Leon Suites. And then we have a track called Wishful Beginnings, which is apparently about the ritual murder of a young woman, taking some influence from Twin Peaks. But Wishful Beginnings is the most annoying David Bowie song that's ever been recorded, primarily because its rhythm track is basically just some guy going and then just endlessly looped. It's tedious, it's boring, it's uninteresting. Oh man, total B-side material. When you have tracks like Nothing to Be Desired and Get Real that are actual bloody B-sides, the fact that Wishful Beginnings is on this, it leans the album into bloated double album, concept album bullshit territory. So you could make an absolutely stunning single LP version of it by taking the segues out, probably taking out Wishful Beginnings, and maybe taking out Through These Architects' Eyes as well. We have track number 13, 15 maybe 14, We Prick You, again played live quite a lot. To me, listening to We Prick You is, again, you can really hear the Nine Inch Nails influence here, but it's a kind of slinkier, dirtier version of Nine Inch Nails. There's drum and bass in the rhythms. There's an idea of words as punctuation. The way that the song is constructed, the speed and the meter and the rhythm of the words is just as important as the words themselves. The idea of "Daddy don't ever tell you ba 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 boo boo boo," and it's more like you could listen to the vocal melody and it could be a drum track. The way that, whereas the sounds, the words being used, are merely kind of like oral punctuation, in much the same way as Def Leppard lyrics are absolutely atrocious. They're designed to be listened to, not read or understood. As anybody that has tried to go, what the hell does "Pour Some Sugar on Me" actually mean? You know, living like a bomb with a telephone. I was like, what? Are those words? No, it's just sonic stuff to fill the space. Side 4. I mean, basically what I'm telling you here is you could probably skip almost all of side 3 apart from No Control and The Voyeur of Utter Destruction. Side 4 is considerably less rubbish, by the way, because it has apart from We Prick You, Boo, it's got I'm Deranged, which later made an appearance in a remixed form as the end credits of David Lynch's Lost Highway. Through These Architects' Eyes, which again is the idea of looking at a town from an architect's eyes is very different from looking at it as a person. Now, I worked in property, estates and buildings for about 15 years, and you know, I enjoyed it. It was fascinating because it helped me understand how a city works, how a city is designed. So for example, you can put me in a city right now, and if it's in the UK, I could probably find the high street pretty quickly just by the construction of it and by the way that the town feels and looks and acts. Nobody ever talks about town planning. Nobody talks about the shape of buildings or how they're designed or the way that an IKEA is designed to lead you in one path all the way through it. But houses are machines for living in, to quote the Manic Street Preachers t-shirts. Towns are machines made out of buildings. Buildings have purposes. And when you think about those from that perspective, you then start to understand that when you look at a town through an architect's eyes, you see a machine that is a construction, it's an organism, it's an ecosystem, and the way that the town operates and the way that the buildings work and how the people work within the buildings, absolutely fascinating from a social sciences point of view, even down to the use of hostile architecture to kind of push homeless people out of the city centre, for example. Definitely that last case, very, very bad thing indeed. Do not do it. It's really bad. It's horrible. It's very bad manners, very poor form. But the idea being that you look at a town from an architect's eyes and you can see a town as a machine. It's an operation, and the people within it are kind of like blood cells that operate inside that machine that make it work. And each part of the town or each part of the city has its, there's, you know, the Chinese quarter, there's the record shops quarter, there's the bit that's full of the tech bros, there's the bit that's full of the hotels, and it's kind of like that's the kidney and that's the liver and that's the heart and that's all that stuff, and together it makes a fully rounded system which somehow just about works, normally encapsulated in a ring road, and if you're in Coventry, a one-directional one. Why? I don't understand, but so be it. And then we have the last segue, which is Nathan Adler, and then the last track on the album, which we've talked about before, Strangers When We Meet. This time revisited, remixed, reimagined, rebooted, if you want to use the modern word for it, taking again its title from the well-worn path of the idea of monogamy versus infidelity, the idea of deception as an essential part of romance, the idea that when you meet somebody, even before you start a relationship with them, you're a stranger to them. And then that person doesn't become a stranger. Or to quote Bros, all of my friends were strangers when I met them, which, you know, you can only go so far when it comes to quoting that particular band. And there's Strangers When We Meet is also revisited from a slightly different perspective on this album, because it has as part of it this kind of long tonal guitar part that runs all through the song like a stick of rock, that's very, very reminiscent of the guitar part that was laid down for the studio version of Heroes. And that resolution gives the album a sense of the last two tracks. I think they're not unintentional the way that they're placed there. The idea of the town as the ecosystem, and then Strangers We Meet as being like a relationship that makes existing within that worthwhile and rewarding. So that's the Outside album. There's a lot more to come. I don't know how much more of it there is to come. Outside was meant to be the first of 5 albums that were going to be dealing with this non-linear Gothic Hypercycle bullshit. Part 2 was due to be called Contamination, 3 Afrikaans, 4 Inside, and 5 A Night in Oxford Town. And apparently up to 27 hours of material was prepared for those, but they never got finished or mixed. Instead, everything was boiled down to the core songs that are on the album, which is, now the one which most people know and often forget exists. The second single that was released from the album was the remix and re-recording of Strangers When We Meet, this time backed with what was allegedly a live version of The Man Who Sold the World, but isn't. It is a studio re-recording, and it also has on it a LP mix of Strangers When We Meet and a track called Get Real, which you can't get anywhere else. Well, you can, but you couldn't at the time. This single didn't sell spectacularly well. I think it got 52 or something in the charts, But what we did have, as I've mentioned before, the third single that was released from the album, the highest charter, the Pet Shop Boys remix of Hello Space Boy, which is tantalising because I would have loved an LP of Bowie going full on electronica, not just a little bit electronica, but you know, like two guys with synthesizers making lots of bleepy noises whilst David narrated absolute nonsense and bullshit over the top. It would have been a fantastic experiment. It would have in fact been a brilliant adventure, but we didn't get it. Instead, David went on the road. The film Trainspotting came out, which featured Lust for Life, which David had written and obviously and recorded with Iggy Pop as part of the Lust for Life album back in 1977. And David slowly became rehabilitated as a cool figure. Before he did that, he went on tour and he played in America. Here's the standard and best known live bootleg release from this, where he did a double headline set with Nine Inch Nails. Nine Inch Nails played for probably about 65 minutes. David played with Nine Inch Nails for about 20 minutes and then played on his own for about an hour and a bit. And what you'd find is during this set is that he would play none of the big hits at all. You know, this particular set, which isn't necessarily fully representative of it because this is a few weeks into the tour, he didn't play any of the hits apart from Under Pressure and a massively remixed version of The Man Who Sold the World. So if you were lucky, you know, you got Look Back in Anger and Breaking Glass, but that was it. You know, you got a number of songs which hadn't been played for a very, very long period of time. You got him doing Jack Brel's My Death, which he hadn't done since about 1973. You got Joe the Lion, which if he played it had been maybe in 1983 on the tour. So you got lots of material that hadn't been played very often at all. And these were captured in a number of posthumous live releases. Now this period, there's been an awful lot of posthumous Bowie releases. The first one, and the one which captures most of the material, the live material, is the Brilliant Live Adventures box set, which I think was released month by month in very limited editions of about 6,000 CDs and 4,000 LPs, plus you could then buy the box separately. It was, as a previous NOTCAST has said, a fucking rip-off. Of course, I bought the first couple, then I realised what a mess it was going to be, and I was like, I don't really want to be, you know, left halfway through with an empty box missing 3 of the LPs. So 2 albums, 2 live albums were released from the tour. There is Lynchian, which was recorded at the Dallas Starplex on the 13th of October 1995. This features the David only portion of the set, not the Nine Inch Nails material. And again, closes on Under Pressure and Teenage Wildlife, and is particularly light on hits. The second one is the No Trendy Rechauffe, whatever that means in English, because that's French, recorded at the Birmingham NEC on, I think, the 13th of December 1995 for a show called the Twix Mix, which you could get tickets for by eating lots of Twix and sending off chocolate wrappers. I mean, frankly, that's ridiculous. If I'd have known that I could have turned up on the night, paid 10 quid and gone to see him, and that the venue was half empty, rather than buying a lot of Twix, which I didn't particularly like, trust me, I would have bloody done it. But they didn't do that, and so therefore even though I was 6 miles away from where this album was recorded on the night, I was not there. This is a slightly different set list. It's added Scary Monsters, and it's also added, I think, let's think, Hello Space Boy is on there twice, which makes up for this, that Hello Space Boy not even being on this one. Strangers When We Meet is on there as well. And I think Jump They Say has been added in, as well as Moon Age Daydream. So these, by the way, fantastic live albums. You can get them on Spotify and YouTube for nothing. So if you don't want to buy the limited editions, you can do that. The limited edition version of the Brilliant Live Adventures box set was also released on vinyl. Here it is, with the original first pressings of the lot. Yes, they're still in their shrink wrap, because at some point I thought, I don't want to open them, I've got the CD. I've bought them fully intending to listen to them, but instead I just listened to the CDs. I would better get round to opening those at some point, because a record that is unopened is a waste of a record. But don't worry, I listen to everything I buy. It just takes me a little bit of time to get there sometimes. There was a couple of other posthumous releases which are interesting and essential to get. I think the first one which most people heard was Changes Now Bowie, which was recorded in November 1996 in the run-up to the Earthling album. This is effectively Bowie Unplugged, although it will never ever tell you that it is Bowie Unplugged. This is Bowie performing acoustic versions of a number of songs. Absolutely nothing, of course, from the Outside album, recorded in the studio for a radio special. So that is The Man Who Sold the World, Aladdin Sane, White Night, White Heat, getting, I think, its first studio recording with a Bowie vocal, Shopping for Girls, which I think is a Tin Machine song, Lady Stardust, The Supermen, Repetition, Andy Warhol, and Quicksand. This is a brilliant little record, and it's one that doesn't get enough recognition, primarily because it was a Record Store Day release. It was kind of been and gone. It was released maybe, let me just check the dates here, 2020, and it just kind of appeared and then disappeared. Although obviously Bowie there, frotaging, what a great word frotaging is. Frotaging his earthling coat, which tells you which year it belongs to. This is a really great Bowie acoustic record. And in 2022 we also got the brilliant Live Adventure Record Store Day release, which was CD and 12-inch 4 tracks, very expensive. I think this was about £30, which is frankly a bloody rip-off. Featuring a new version of I'm Afraid of Americans, which was recorded first, called Johnny Downloader, from about 1995. I have not been to Oxford Town, an alternative mix of that and 2 live tracks from the Shakespeare Festival in New York in 1995, those being A Small Plot of Land and My Death. Interesting, fascinating to hear, but basically massively overpriced B-sides. And there's also a CD version. Given that they have, I think, had their fingers burnt a little bit from not producing enough copies of things like Brilliant Adventures and getting a huge amount of and deserved kicking for it, they then decided to press probably slightly too many copies of it. So this is probably quite affordable and quite achievable to find. There's a bit of burgeoning market in bootleg releases as well. Here is David Bowie and 9 Inch Nails live in 1995, recorded at the Shoreline Amphitheatre and also the Riverport Amphitheatre at Maryland Heights. This is just the Bowie and 9 Inch Nails section, so features Subterraneans, Scary Monsters, Reptile, Hello Space Boy and Hurt. The last thing, and up until the release of the Brilliant Adventures box set, hello, I'm Brilliant Adventures, the only way to get hold of expanded editions of the later period albums of what's commonly known as the Silver Box from 2003, 2004, which features 2 disc versions of Outside, Earthling, Heathen, Hours, and the Reality album with all the B-sides on, in these kind of like very nice little sleeves, which are effectively vinyl replicas. So much so that this tells you this is actually excerpts from Outside, when it absolutely isn't. It's the Outside album in full, plus an album of B-sides, which features all the remixes that you might expect from the LP. And in fact, the track listing is the only way you can tell what tracks are on this one is if you actually look at the disc, which if you're trying to find out while you're playing it, it's really, really difficult. So the second CD here features Get Real and Nothing to Be Desired, a jungle mix of I'm Deranged, and all the remixes of Hello Space Boy, A Small Plot of Land, and The Heart's Filthy Lesson, including some versions of Heart's Filthy Lesson that were only on vinyl, so the Good Karma mix by Tim Simonian, and the Simple Test mix, and the Rubber mix as well. But these are, I don't think all of those mixes are actually on Brilliant Adventure. So you might need to still get a copy of the Silver Box. At one point, these were like 10 quid. They aren't 10 quid now. At one point also, they were like over £100 for copies of them. I paid more than 10 and definitely less than £100 for it, because it is effectively 5 Bowie studio albums in an expanded form. And then if you're just not that bothered about the live stuff and everything else that goes with it, just go for Brilliant Adventure, the CD box set that features Recall 5, featuring all the B-sides and a book and all the studio albums, running from Black Tie, White Noise, all the way through to the then unreleased Toy. And this features Get Real, Strangers When We Meet, The Man Who Sold the World, I'm Afraid of Americans, the version that was recorded for the Showgirl soundtrack, not the Johnny Downloader mix, the remix of Hello Space Boy, an alternative mix of I Am With Name, and a soundtrack version of the track Small Plot of Land that appeared on the soundtrack to the film Basquiat, where David played Sir Andy of Warhol. Small world, I wouldn't want to walk it. Outside is one of my very, very favourite David Bowie records. I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's probably my favourite one out of everything he's ever done. In my top 3 Bowie albums, absolutely. And it contains one of my top 3 Bowie songs, No Control. It's very underrated, and it's always right for a re-listen. So do investigate. I recommend it highly. That is the longest NOTCAST I've ever done, at 59 minutes and 47 seconds as I speak. And I'm starting to run out of puff, so I better stop. So thank you for watching almost an hour of me talking about this record. And take care of yourselves and each other. Stay beautiful. I'll see you soon. Bye.